So about a week ago, I did upload a Utah Jazz video where I kind of talked about their future and if I were the general manager, what I would do to help rebuild that team for the next 5 years. So today we're going to be doing that with another team that's been in the headlines the whole offseason, and that is the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets are in a position where two of their top players kind of won out. Kyrie Irving did opt into his 2023 player option, but there is a chance that he leaves at the end of the season. It's looking more and more day by day he's going to leave at the end of this year, and Kevin Durant publicly requested a trade, saying Phoenix, Miami are his top options that he would like to go, but he's got 4 years left on his contract, so the Nets don't need to trade him at all. So yeah, I'm going to be giving you guys 5 ways the Brooklyn Nets should handle their future just for maybe the next 5 seasons. So my first word of advice for the Brooklyn Nets is to wait it out for KD and Kyrie. See how you are at probably the midway point of the season. You could say the trade deadline. See if any teams get desperate at the deadline. Maybe it's a Lakers, maybe it's like a random team like, who knows, Dallas, Phoenix, and they would give you a Godfather offer for KD, or they'll overpay for Kyrie just to make a run at next year's finals. You can always move Kevin Durant next offseason, so you do not need to move him right now. I don't think that Kevin Durant would sit out this year because he's getting up there in age. He has a legacy to cement if he wants to be a top 10 player of all time. I don't think he'd waste a year of his contract and his kind of prime still, just to sit out to prove a point to Brooklyn. Like the Brooklyn Nets with their constructed roster, hey, they could still make a run next year. Maybe KD, Kyrie, and Ben Simmons all gel together. I mean, that's really asking for a lot because we know how Kyrie's been with kind of some of his past co-mates. Ben Simmons hasn't played in almost 2 years, or you could say it's been more than just a little bit over a year. But yeah, I wouldn't make any initial moves right now. I think Kyrie's probably at his lowest value that he could be at all year. And like I said, say hypothetically the Lakers are maybe around 500. The West is pretty much very hard to go through. They would maybe give you 2 first-round picks this time around instead of 1 that they would right now for Kyrie to offload him with Russ, and then you buy out Russ. You know the deal. And every year there are teams that just disappoint and they would just go all in on a move next year. That's why I was kind of a little bit confused when Boston offered Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant, because you just went to the finals and were 2 games away from winning it with Jaylen Brown and not Kevin Durant. So I guess maybe Kevin Durant gets you over that hump, but I still think that would just be very silly to do, especially if you're giving up Marcus Smart and maybe Grant Williams or Peyton Pritchard as well. So yeah, there's maybe a way that, hey, yeah, Boston loses in round 2 this year and they get desperate. Or maybe there's a team like Phoenix that also loses in round 2, or Memphis or something, and they just have a really disappointing 2023 season, and they're like, okay, it's Kevin Durant time. We're willing to give you the Godfather package. So basically, that was number 1. Number 2 is just get what you can for Kyrie Irving, and for Kevin Durant, you need some draft capital in return if you are going to trade them at any point this year or next offseason, or hey, it still could be this offseason. I really didn't say in the last kind of point what I wanted for those 2 players. So for Kyrie, it's really just anything at this point. If it's a first-round pick for the Lakers, I would do that in 2025, 7 or 9. You can look at that. I'm not really sure what other teams would be interested in Kyrie. You could have Miami as well. I don't think I would be entertained by any of their first. Like, I would just be annoying and I would say, give us Tower Hero. I know they wouldn't say yes to that, but like, I wouldn't really be too interested in Kyle Lowry unless you can flip him to a third team to get maybe a first round pick or something in return, or any type of young players. But yeah, I would say for Kyrie Irving, just get what you can at the deadline. See if you can get a first from the Lakers. See if a team would overpay. I'm not sure if there's any other teams that would be interested, particularly in Kyrie Irving. Maybe it's Minnesota and they would do D'Lo for Kyrie and you just have a D'Lo asset or something like that going into the future. Maybe a team like Charlotte would just say, yeah, take Gordon Hayward and James Bouknight. Like, we just want to give somebody around LaMelo, even though that probably wouldn't be a great idea. But you know what I mean, right? Or maybe Washington wants to make a move like Kristaps for Kyrie. I don't know, just to give somebody next to Beal. There's kind of ways you can go about this for Kyrie. Wait until the deadline. And hey, the Nets, I think, with their constructed roster, should at least be a play-in tournament team at worst. At worst. Now, you're hoping KD stays healthy. You're hoping Kyrie stays healthy. But at worst, they're playing tournament team. Hey, you maybe just take a shot at the playoffs next year. Maybe 2023 playoffs come around, we get maybe vintage 2016 Kyrie, maybe we get 2017 KD in the playoffs, and they can make a run at the finals. You never know. But yeah, for Kevin Durant, in a return, you want to stay as competitive as possible, and maybe get some draft picks as well, like I mentioned, because you don't have a lot of your draft capital going forward. That is currently going to the Houston Rockets. Now, they have the Sixers first round pick this year from the James Harden trade, but there is a swap with Houston, so they're going to get the worst out of the 2 picks. You don't have your first round pick in 2024. That goes to the Rockets from the James Harden trade. In 2025, there's a swap. You get the worst out of the 2 picks between you and Houston. 2026, yep, Houston gets your first as well. And then in 2027, there's a swap. Yeah, so there's a lot going on here, which is Brooklyn mainly giving their picks and swaps to the Rockets for the next 4 drafts. So yeah, in a return for KD, you want to stay as good as possible. You don't want a kind of relapse from what happened for you in the kind of late 2010s where you lost Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum in the Kevin Garnett trade. You don't want that again. You don't want to be a bad team without their own first-round pick. So you either want to stay competitive, which I like that could be Jaylen Brown and a return for a trade. Maybe you entertain the deal later, but yeah, Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton. You want to get good players in return. Maybe it's a Brandon Ingram from the Pelicans. That's another team I mentioned before. Like if they have a disappointing year, they might be like, okay, Kevin Durant time. We have draft capital, young players, and a star piece in Brandon Ingram. They could make that trade. So yeah, for KD, you really want to maximize your return. You want to get a good player to build around him and let's say Ben Simmons for the future, and you want some draft capital as well that could maybe end up being good picks down the line. Number 3, and this could be if the Nets are good or bad this year, I would try to move Joe Harris or Seth Curry for an asset this season, and that asset being a first-round pick. Honestly, I wouldn't probably take a first-round pick in this draft. I would see if you can maybe get a 2024, 5, or 6 first-round pick, because who knows where these teams will be at by then. You don't really need both Harris and Curry because they kind of fit that similar role of that sharpshooter off-ball player for your top ball handlers in Kyrie and KD. Joe Harris has about 2 years left on his deal worth about $36 million, so the Seth Curry deal that has 1 year, $8 million left on it would be easier to move, but I think for either player, you should be able to get a draft pick, especially if Joe Harris comes back fully healthy this year and it's just the lights out 40+% from 3 shooter. It's just, yeah, you got to find that matching salary, which could be an issue. That's why Seth Curry, $8 million. You could trade him in any team. So you'd want to give them all their run this year because even if you're good and Harris and Curry are playing well, just trade Curry. Get a future first round pick down the line because you really need to increase your draft capital. So I would at least move one of those guys this season. Number 4, look at potential new head coaches. It is unfortunate how Steve Nash worked out for the Nets because Steve Nash, if you know me, is one of my favorite, probably my favorite NBA player ever. I try to model my basketball game growing up off him. He was just like an elite shooter, an elite passer. He was a winning player, and I love Steve Nash. So it really sucks to see him really not do all that well in Brooklyn, but it was kind of going to be doomed from the start. There was obviously the aura, the atmosphere that he wasn't really going to be the head coach. He was just kind of letting KD and Kyrie and Harden run the show. So I would look at maybe proven head coaches, especially if you move KD and you're going into this cycle post KD and Kyrie, but you want to be competitive. Look at head coaches that have a proven track record. I'm not saying Tibbs is going to be gone from the Knicks, but say you look at him, like a Rick Carlisle type from a couple years ago where the Pacers scooped him up, like Dwayne Casey as well from Detroit, if maybe they go in a different direction after this year. I mean, I would say bring back Kenny Atkinson, but they probably wouldn't do that. Mike D'Antoni. You just need a coach that doesn't have to be the championship pedigree coach you're bringing in. He just needs to get you to the playoffs. Kind of like the Knicks with Tibbs, right? Now, Tibbs, I don't think is going to win a championship for the Knicks, but hey, in 2021, he was able to bring the Knicks back to the playoffs, bring them back to relevancy, and that's just all you need while you're just trying to get past that 2027 hump where you don't have your first round picks and you're trying to build around, say it's a Jaylen Brown or Brandon Ingram or whoever the top guy is in return in the KD trade. And number 5, lastly, play the sign and trade game. Now, this really doesn't apply to Kevin Durant, but it does with Kyrie Irving. At the end of this season, say he walks, try to get something in return in a sign and trade. And if you see players like that recently were featured in sign and trades like Lonzo Ball, D'Angelo Russell, Kyle Lowry to an extent, you look at those players and what it took to get them back, there's not really a premier package. So you kind of offload a little bit of cap in the longer term. You could bring in a player in a sign and trade and really not have to give up that much. Or even maybe just all it takes is Joe Harris's expiring contract and a second round pick, and you can bring in a player like Lonzo Ball if a team were to allow a player like that walk. So yeah, that is going to be for me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and just kind of talking about the Brooklyn Nets future and what I think they should do pretty much this year and how it could affect them over the next 5 years. So yeah, it's pretty much wait out for KD and Kyrie. You don't need to move them this offseason. Number 2 is when you do move them, just get all you can for Kyrie Irving, any type of valuable asset. And for KD, you really need that player that can help you remain competitive for the next 5 seasons when you don't have all your first round picks. Number 3 is try to move Joe Harris or Seth Curry for a first round pick this season. You don't need both, even if you're trying to compete. Number 4 is look at new potential head coaches post Steve Nash, post Kevin Durant that can help you remain competitive. And number 5 is play the sign and trade game long term. So yeah, that is going to be for me. Hope you guys did enjoy. Drop a like if you guys do enjoy these style of videos. Let me know what team we should do next, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.